Mhm. Hi, AJ.
Hey Becky, how's it going? Can you hear me okay?
Hi, Melissa. Is that you?
Can you hear me, Becky?
The answer is yes, AJ. We can hear it. Hi, Becky.
I can't hear you. Muted.
Oh, no, I should be okay.
Becky, I think there must be something wrong with your audio because
Oh, 1 minute. Is that better? Can you hear me now?
I can hear you.
You can? Yeah.
Yep.
No.
Okay.
Still can't hear you.
I think there's something wrong with Becky's
I
audio.
can't hear AJ. Oh, maybe it's me.
I think so.
It's me.
How's that?
I'm gonna duck off to finish cooking dinner, but I can hear. Okay.
Wonderful. Yeah, no, because at the select board meeting, I had to mute. And that's
Oh
why.
yeah, that's right.
I figured that's what it was.
I'm gonna change. Obviously, we don't have a Christmas tree at the town hall, so I'm going to change my name on this.
I knew it was you.
I know.
I'm impressed that you still have your Christmas tree up.
Well,
Is it like a year-round thing?
No, it's more of I usually leave it up when there's snow on the ground, right? Because snow, winter, I mean,
Yeah.
it doesn't really look Christmassy, except for the
Right.
lake and it being an evergreen.
Yeah.
Might as well enjoy it a little longer. It's so dark outside
Yeah.
anyway and stormy.
Yeah.
It'll come down this weekend.
Ah. I'll leave a big hole.
Yeah, then what do I do? What do I do with it? I have an idea actually. I'm gonna it's a planter I saw on Pinterest. You take a trunk of a tree that fell down and you put these things on it, make it look like a lantern tree, but like a plant tree too. Like you put your house plant.
Yeah,
cool.
Interesting.
There's plenty of trees that came down this winter,
Oh,
Sounds like a good weekend project.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, I'm gonna run stuff to the refrigerator. I'll be back.
Okay.
Hey, AJ.
Hey Paul, how's it going? Can you hear me okay, Paul? Hi Paul, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can now. I had my
Good.
speakers shut off, but
Okay, good.
they're on.
All right.
How you
sounds
doing?
good. I'm good. How are you doing?
Good. Very good. Thanks. So we're all set on how this will proceed tonight, I assume?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
That sounds
Okay.
good. We're unfortunately we're gonna have a smaller turnout from the FinCom. Just scheduling wasn't great this year. So I can't remember exactly. We kind of went through at our last meeting and now I've forgotten who's gonna be attending tonight, but it's not going to be our full crew, but we should have at least a few.
Bob and George are out, I think.
Yeah.
Jim Moulton's still here and Susie will be here.
Yeah. And I assume Jim Hemingway, I don't think he mentioned anything.
Yeah.
And Rita said Rita said she's gonna join, but she might just be a couple minutes late.
And
Not
April,
Rita,
I
sorry,
just
April,
got a,
excuse me.
yeah, she just texted me, at 20 after she was leaving Amherst. She figured she'd be
Okay.
10 minutes late.
Okay.
So do you need to have a quorum for your meeting here, AJ?
Good question. I feel like we're not actually doing any decision-making tonight. We're just sort of presenting information. So my instinct is that we don't need one, but Becky, what do you think?
I don't think it's required, especially with the moderator handling all the questions. But I think you're gonna have
Okay.
one. You're gonna have, next person makes a
Yeah.
quorum.
Yeah, actually, I see George coming on, so great.
So I was wrong. Sorry, George, I thought you were out tonight, but that's
No, this is the last meeting I can make.
For what?
Michael, DiChiara, did you see my response to you, just about half an hour ago?
I did, and I responded already. Thank you.
Okay.
On board. I'm on board with your suggestions, and I think we'll just do the report part. So, thank you.
Okay. All right, thanks.
Good points.
Becky, you might want to make me co-host now, and just because I'll be sharing stuff.
I'll make George a backup co-host in case.
Always a good idea. Yeah.
Mr. Mate.
All right.
Well, I'm,
So I think with Jim hopping on here, I think we do have a quorum tonight, which is great.
AJ, I'll just leave it up to you whenever you want to get your meeting officially started. You can do that. And
All
then,
right. Well, I'll tell you what, Paul, I'll call the FinCom to order at 6:30. And I know you wanted to do a little bit of just kind of setting expectations and discussing process. So whenever you want to start with that, I think that's fine. I'm also happy to wait a few minutes if you think we want to give time for people to hop on.
yeah, it's only 6:32. So why don't we give people another 2 minutes or so, and then we'll get going.
Okay. All right, sounds good.
And since you've called your meeting to order already, I'll just start in about 2 minutes. Okay?
Okay, great. Sounds good.
Okay, so by my clock, it's 6:34. Looks like a number of other people have just joined us, so I think we'll get started here. Thanks for joining us this evening for this pre-annual town meeting presentation of the proposed fiscal year 2025 Shutesbury Town budget. I'm Paul Lyons, the town moderator, and I'll be facilitating this session again this year. I think this is maybe the fourth or so year that we've done this. Format will be similar to what we've done in previous years, starting with a overview of the budget by the Finance Committee members, followed by questions from attendees. Please note, if you have questions that arise during the presentation, don't try to ask them during the presentation. Send them to me, if you would, via the chat function. Hopefully that's right down on the bottom of your page, or jot them down and you can ask them later on. I'll organize all the questions that I receive, present them to the Finance Committee after their presentation. After that, if there's still time and remaining questions, we can try to open it up to more of a live question and answer discussion. Please remember, this session is meant to provide information about the budget. It's not an opportunity to debate or express opinions about it. That opportunity will come on Saturday at the annual town meeting, when you can not only debate any or all of the budget items, but also actually vote on them. Finally, this evening, if there's time and interest after the budget portion of this evening's program, we can review the rest of the warrant articles. We have people here who can explain what the articles are and answer questions that you may have about them. The more information we feel we can get out before town meeting, the more efficient we can be on Saturday and try to get out of town meeting as early as possible. So if we're ready to begin, I'll turn it back over to AJ Cashew for an overview of our fiscal 2025 budget. AJ.
Okay, thanks, Paul. Hi, everybody. Good to see a decent turnout tonight. My name is AJ Cashew. I'm the chair of the Finance Committee, and I'm joined by, I believe it's 4 other members of the committee tonight. Let me see my screen here. So we have Susie Mosier, George Arvanitis, Jim Hemingway, and Jim Walton. I believe April Stein will be joining us in a few minutes. And then Bob Groves is also a member of our committee, but he's not available tonight. Am I missing anybody? I think that's our full committee. Yeah, as Paul mentioned, I think this is an opportunity for us to maybe share kind of a more an overview of our budget process and our actual budget that's going to be voted on at annual town meeting this Saturday, and also answer questions from any of you who have them in kind of a format that might be more difficult to accomplish at a town meeting. So I did want to point out, and I'm going to actually share my screen. I wanted to direct you to the website, where there's a number of documents that I think will be important if you want to understand the budget. So you'll see there's a link here to learn more about annual town meeting. If you click that link and you scroll to the bottom, there are a series of, really the first 3 links here are kind of our main deliverables or documents that will be relevant for Saturday's meeting. The first is an annual kind of budget summary report that we do as a finance committee every year. And then we have two documents that are kind of represent our budget. One is an expense budget and the other is a revenue budget. So, it might be helpful for you to download those if you haven't already, and maybe follow along as we're talking tonight. Okay. Just a kind of word on our process. So the Finance Committee put out a letter to and a budget form to all town departments, I believe back in October, and then or maybe around October. And over the course of the year, we've had meetings with department heads representing kind of all of our key departments: school, police, fire, highway, etc., where we take a look at a proposed budget that they submitted to us in advance of that meeting and answered questions from committee members. That's kind of the first step in our process. And then once we've kind of completed that, those set of meetings, that really happens kind of through February. We spend, really a month, 6 weeks or so, actually compiling and making decisions, recommendations that produce what is the budget that we're going to review tonight and discuss our present it at annual town meeting and have you or have the town vote on. That the budget has been unanimously kind of recommended by all members of the Finance Committee. That doesn't necessarily mean that every committee member agrees with every single decision that went into putting that budget together, but I think the point being that collectively the committee, I think, supports the budget and is recommending that our community approve it at annual town meeting. So I'm going to go ahead and pull up that annual kind of budget summary report and kind of walk through it tonight, because I think that's rather than do kind of a line item review of the budget, I think that would not be a very interesting meeting. So I'm going to pull up this document here. Okay, and kind of give you a high level overview of the budget this year. So I think right off the bat, it's fair to say that this was perhaps the most kind of challenging budget year, at least in recent history. We have developed a budget here that totals $7,208,000, we'll call it. And that total represents a 4.5% increase over our FY24 budget. And in dollars, that represents an additional $309,000 or a $309,000 increase over last fiscal year's budget. So while certainly not unprecedented in the history of our town, it is fair to say that that's a larger increase than we've observed in recent fiscal years. I think last fiscal year 24, the budget we proposed at annual town meeting represented a 3.4% increase over the prior year. In the 22 annual town meeting, we presented a budget that represented a 1.1% increase over the prior fiscal year. So this is definitely more of a bump than we've observed in at least the last few years. And so what does this mean for taxpayers? You'll see that there's a little box off to the right here that summarizes what this is going to mean in terms of homeowners' property taxes. So right now we're projecting a tax rate of $18.53 per $1,000 of assessed value. So the average single-family home in Shutesbury is valued at $343,570. So with a tax rate of $18.53, that means that the average property tax bill is estimated right now to be $6,367. So a couple things to state. That tax rate is based on a set of assumptions that we're making right now, that may change as the assessments of our properties happens kind of over the summer. I believe that's the timing on that. And so if the town assessor assesses our kind of in total, the value of our properties to be higher than what was assumed here, that would mean that we would have a lower tax rate. So this is just kind of based on current assumptions today, but again, that it's entirely likely that that number will go down somewhat based on the assessor's conclusions about overall total value of all property in the town. So as I mentioned, right now we're estimating the average single family tax bill to be $6,367. Last year for FY24, it was $6,126. So in essence, we are, with this budget, we are expecting the average tax bill to increase by $241. Obviously, the more valuable your property, the larger that number will be, the less valuable your property. If it's under that average value of $310,000 or so, that increase will be a smaller amount. So that's kind of the sort of main takeaway in terms of what this is going to mean in terms of kind of property tax payments. So let's do a little bit of a review of the budget itself. So the budget really has, two sides to it. There's a revenue side, which is kind of how do we collect money in order to fund the other side of the budget, which is the expense budget. And that's essentially all of our different departments, all of our services, obviously expend money to do the work that it takes to operate a town. And those two things, the revenue and the expense budget, need to be balanced. That's our part of our process and responsibility. So a couple things so we're going to take a look at two pie charts that essentially tell us what are the components and what are the sort of relative sizes of the different components to our budget, both on the revenue side and on the expense side. So on the revenue side, you can see here that almost 3/4 of the funds that are collected by the town to fund our budget come from residential taxes. That's about 75%. Other sources of revenue that we rely on are state aid, and there are kind of a few different sources of kind of municipal funding that we get from the state. There's something called Chapter 70 funding, which is the way that the state supports our school budgets. And there's also an unrestricted government aid fund that or grant that comes to the town as well. And so about 10.5% of our revenue comes from these different sources of state aid. There's also, commercial taxes, which are applied using the same tax rate as our residential taxes. That's about 4.5% of our revenue. There are local receipts. Those are things like motor vehicle excise taxes. We have a new category, a relatively new category of local receipts, which are like room taxes that are applied to short-term rentals, Airbnb bookings, and that sort of thing. That's a new source of revenue that's come in the last maybe 2 years or so. Becky, I think I'm right about that. And then yeah, I would say those are the kind of main sources of revenue. You can see the rest of this pie chart for other categories. Let's take a look at our expense budget. So this is essentially kind of what it takes to run our town. And, a couple of key takeaways here, right, is that not surprisingly, 59 of the largest piece of our single piece of our expense budget is education funding. And so that's running our elementary school and our portion of the regional schools budget. And so that together, that represents 59% of our total expense budget. And then, we have public safety, which is 6% of our budget, highways, which is roughly 8% of our budget. Sorry, I should say highway and public works. So that includes things like, snow removal, the highway department, trash and recycling. There's general government, that's 9%. Culture and recreation, I believe the largest share of that is our library, if I'm not mistaken, if I'm getting the categories right. You can see health insurance is a big chunk as well, about 7%. Yeah, I think those are the kind of largest categories of our budget. So I'll move on. So what are some of the kind of significant increases or decreases that we're experiencing with this budget? So as I mentioned already, overall increase of about $309,000 over FY24. I think two of the notable increases have to do with public school education. So our elementary school budget is increasing by about 5.9%. There are a couple of particular drivers that account for a really large chunk of that increase. One of them is what we've been referring to as kind of a temporary mandated expense that we're required to comply with, and as well as a staff position that was initially created and funded as part of our kind of pandemic. Well, it was utilizing pandemic related funding that the school had. That position is an adjustment counselor that kind of supports the social and emotional well-being of students in the school. And the school committee has made the decision that's an essential position. And so that's now needing to be supported by the operating budget for the school, because obviously most of the pandemic related special funding or support that our schools received is no longer available. So those are the kind of big drivers for that increase. There's what we have put in here is essentially a 6% increase to our assessment for the regional schools, the Amherst Pelham Regional Middle School and High School. We may have questions about this later tonight, but just to let you know that the regional school committee approved a budget for FY25 that would have required an 8.2% increase in our assessment. We've spent quite a bit of time discussing this issue in our committee, and we've recommended that that really a 6% increase is the most that we can accommodate for FY25. And we have, as recently as this past Saturday, I've communicated to the other 3 towns and the regional school committee and the superintendent that we really can only recommend to our town that we fund the regional schools at a 6% increase over last year. As it happens, Leverett is thinking in similar ways about the regional assessment as we are, and so also has its town meeting on Saturday, same day as us, and they will also be, my best information I have available right now, they will be presenting to their town a budget that includes a 6% increase to their regional school assessment. The regional school committee is meeting tonight. They are going to be reviewing and a new budget that would apply a 6% increase to all 4 communities. It's possible they will support that and revote their budget tonight. That's our hope, at least. And so we'll have to see. I'm going to be watching that meeting tomorrow, the recording of it, and we'll see if that's what actually occurs. If that doesn't happen tonight, and then we're going to potentially have a complicated situation where we may not actually be able to proceed with our that aspect of our budget on Saturday. But I don't want to go there just yet, because I'm hopeful that that's not going to happen. So anyway, those are a couple, and just a word on, so why is the regional school increasing by 6%? I think it's fair to say that there are a couple of, maybe 3 or so different drivers for why both our elementary school and our regional school budgets are increasing by somewhat larger amount than in recent years. Part of it's just well, at least for the region, there's recently negotiated contracts that included increases for staff. That's a contributor. Another big contributor is there were a couple of different sources of pandemic-related relief that were awarded to both our elementary school and our regional school, and those sources kind of helped sort of pay for some of the increased expenses in the schools' budgets over the last couple of years. And those sources of funding are dwindling, right? They're not available at the same levels. In fact, I think the region has $500,000 left in one of those sources, and that will be spent. That's being applied to FY25, and that will after FY25 there'll be no more pandemic-related support for the regional schools. So anyway, there's that. So then other notable increases, decreases. So looking at D here, there's a new building committee. I guess the committee's not new, but there's kind of new membership, and there's a project that is underway where they're doing a really impressive and serious review of the condition of all of our municipal buildings in the town, and doing kind of a thorough assessment of what are the conditions, the needs, maintenance needs, capital improvement needs of the various buildings, and they're prioritizing those in a specific way. And with that, where this budget includes a $40,000 increase to essentially fund not all, but some of the repairs that the building committee has identified as kind of the most immediate, most pressing needs. And so that's a notable increase. There are salary increases for town employees, a small increase to elementary school transportation costs. There are a couple of decreases. So there's every year our budget includes a certain amount of funds that go into a finance committee reserve fund, and that fund is used so that we can essentially fund emergencies and unforeseen expenses that come up during the year. And that fund allows us to support those needs without the need for having to call a special town meeting. So that contribution to our reserve fund is decreasing by $20,000 for this year. There's also a $20,000 decrease in what's being allocated for legal expenses. And then all other expense increases together collectively amount to additional $28,000. All right. So I should probably wrap up soon, but let me just look at two here. And I'm just going to do this in the simplest terms I can. So we have something in Massachusetts called Prop 2.5. And what that means is that there's a maximum tax levy that the law allows us to impose on our town. And that maximum levy is calculated essentially as a 2.5% increase over the prior year's tax levy, plus an estimate of new growth, right? So, kind of new development and growth that has occurred in our town. And so that tax levy, according to those rules, where the tax levy is allowed to increase by $225,000 based on those two things, a 2.5% increase over last year's tax levy and this additional new growth. Okay, so in order to stay under that maximum tax levy allowed, we have to utilize something called excess levy capacity, and in the amount of $13,000. And that's essentially like, one way to think about it is that for the last few years where we haven't gone up to that maximum tax levy, we've been essentially banking the difference between what we were allowed to assess and what we actually assessed. And so this is a year where we have to kind of dip into that excess levy capacity in order to comply with Prop 2.5. So that's probably a little bit of a simplified explanation, but hopefully that is good enough for our purposes tonight. Another thing to note here is that our estimated state aid is increasing by paltry $30,000. So this is one of the kind of big picture points that I think we all should be, aware of, which is that we have things like we have a significant amount of inflation that we've experienced over the last few years. We have increases in expenses, particularly in the education sector every year, and those increases in inflation and expenses are really outstripping the kind of paltry increases in state support that we're being provided. And that's a problem, and it doesn't have an easy solution, but it's one that we all should really kind of rally around and speak to our legislators about, and quite frankly, complain about and advocate change, because that the amount of state aid that we're getting each year is really remaining essentially stagnant, and our expenses are increasing, which is why our property taxes are having to increase by more than what I think would be what we would all like. Okay. I think I'll just mention in kind of 3 and 4 here really speak to kind of the status of our cash reserves, essentially the bank account for the town. And there really are 3 different funds. There's a free cash reserve. There's something called capital stabilization, and then regular stabilization. And you'll see here that we had a special town meeting in January. Is it January? I think so. And so as a result, after that, that special town meeting where we appropriated some funds for the culvert project, there was a cost overrun with that project and some kind of legal fees that were required, and some mitigation and testing for gasoline at the fire station. After those appropriations, the total of our cash reserves was at just under $1.5 million. We have a number of capital projects that went through the capital planning review process this year and will be presented and have corresponding warrant articles at our town meeting on Saturday. You can see them listed here: police pickup truck, generator for the highway department, body cameras for the police department, gravel road repairs, and a storage container for the highway department. Saturday, the department heads will, give you some context about what is the rationale for each of those projects. I wanted to mention here that, one of our part of our process, we have to make a recommendation about how to fund those projects if they pass an annual town meeting. And with one exception, we're recommending that they all be funded utilizing our free cash reserves, with one exception, which is $12,000 from capital stabilization to fund some gravel road repairs that the highway department wants to oversee for this year. And then I should mention one important factor here, or detail, which relates to line B here, which is that as a finance committee, we are recommending, and our budget includes the utilization of $70,000 of free cash reserves for two particular categories of expenses. One of which is $40,000 that will support kind of these state mandated expenses for the elementary school that are not long-term, I'll say. And then $30,000 for the building renovations that I mentioned just a couple of minutes ago. So, it's not ideal that we use cash reserves to fund parts of our budget. Usually, that's not a practice that we like to have to use. But in this particular year, it made sense to utilize some cash reserves to limit the impact on taxpayers. And it is the case that we are using cash reserves for projects that are not kind of long-term aspects of our kind of operation of our town, right? These are not kind of permanent features that we expect to see in our budget year after year after year. And so that's what that line is about. Okay, Paul, I probably talked more than I wanted to, so maybe I'll pause here. There's some more information about kind of upcoming capital projects and sort of risks and opportunities, but that may come up during Q&A. So I think maybe I'll just pause there and see what questions people have.
Okay, thanks, AJ. And I need to apologize. I just discovered that we do not have a chat function available tonight. So I don't know if people have been trying to get questions submitted or not, but we'll have to go to Plan B here and just raise hands. So if you do have questions for AJ or about the budget in general, you can just raise your hand, and I'll just trust you that those questions are going to be appropriate, and let's go for it. Any questions? I should say we did have one question come in to the moderator's email address prior to the meeting. It was really about revolving funds, which are not directly a part of the budget. I don't know if AJ, you would want to address that, try to address that now, or we could just wait till after the budget discussion and when we're talking about other warrant articles. So did you see the question, AJ, that I had sent you?
Yeah, but could you, I guess, for the benefit of everybody, and also just to remind me exactly what do you have the question in front of you?
It'll take me a moment to pull it up,
Okay.
but basically it was about Article 12 in the warrant, which is the article that deals with all of the revolving funds that the town has.
And,
And the question.
and the limits the limits for each of those funds.
Correct, yeah. And the question was in regards to the SREX. I think there's like $20,000 spending limit on SREX, and the questioner was asking if that's still applicable or appropriate.
I'm going to look to Becky for help on that.
Becky's got her hand raised.
Becky.
Go for it, Becky.
So the SREC amount, we have not made any expenditures out of that revolving fund. And the 20,000 is quite high. Our SRECs have dropped off since we hit I believe it was the 15-year mark. So there's not quite as much money coming in, so we could consider lowering that, but it was set at that amount because if we are to utilize it, it will probably be for a bigger capital project at some point in time.
Okay, thank you. Still looking for questions. I actually did have one, AJ, based on your the last thing one of the last things you said was for capital expenditures, you were proposing, or the FinCom was proposing, that we use free cash for all of those capital items except for the gravel road improvement. I was just wondering what the reasoning was for using capital stabilization there instead of free cash.
Well, I think do I hear an echo there? I think it's. I mean, I think generally speaking, I mean that's clearly a project that is a capital improvement, right? That quite frankly I think needs to be made, and so that particular fund, capital stabilization funds, are really appropriate for those kinds of capital projects. It's not a piece of equipment like a vehicle or a generator. It's really making kind of a capital improvement to the infrastructure of our town, our roads. So that was the logic behind that. And they're also, I mean, for, I guess, one kind of practical point there, right, is that will require a 2/3 majority vote to approve that project over, as opposed to a majority vote, which would be required for the other projects where we're proposing to fund them from free cash. Not much else to say about that. That would be my response.
Okay, thank you. I see Amanda
Sure.
has a question.
Hi, thank you, Paul. So are we able to ask specific questions about the revenue budget and the expense budget at this point, or are they planning to go over that separately? Or is it okay to ask?
I'm not going to be doing, I wasn't planning on doing kind of a line by line review of the budget. So if you have a specific question, feel free to raise it. Yeah.
Okay, I also have a question about the SES budget, but I don't know if that's anything you want to talk about tonight. It's sort of tied in with my other question about school choice. So.
All right. So well, what ask your question. I may be able to answer it. I may not be able to. And and the other thing I should mention is, I've got another 4 committee members here, so I'm going to open it up and anybody can answer these questions. But go ahead.
Thanks, AJ. Okay,
Sure.
the first one's just, I think, kind of simple on the revenue budget. I just wonder why the state sheet assessments, line 35 to 39, are included in this budget when they appear to be expenses? And why is school choice sending the only line item expense repeated in the expense budget on line 13?
Okay, so maybe I ought to share my screen. So your first question was about, so this is our revenue budget, and so your question is on the
The next-
state aid section, which is
Yeah.
what we refer to as the cherry sheet. There are essentially kind of two sections to that. One represents the kind of sources of state aid that come to us, and sort of credits to the town, if you will. And then the next section are essentially deductions from that. So these refer to items that reduce the amount of state aid that we receive. I think this is the appropriate. I'm not sure why we wouldn't put that on here. This represents the total amount of state aid that we receive. So that corresponds to, in the annual report that we looked at earlier in the meeting, there was a slice of that revenue pie that pertained to state aid, and that corresponds to this number. So when the state calculates what is the amount of aid that they will provide each municipality, that total amount includes some kind of credits to the town, like Chapter 70 funding, unrestricted government aid, but there are also some credits that reduce that amount. I'm sorry, that not credits, but there are some items that reduce that amount. So
Okay, so you're
does
basically
that answer
saying,
your question? Yeah.
yeah, I think so. So you're just basically subtracting 35
Yes.
to 39 from the 904, 100, right?
Exactly.
You're coming out with
Correct. Yeah.
74. Okay, I didn't actually
Correct.
crunch the numbers, so okay,
Yep.
thank
No,
you.
that's right.
Okay, so my school choice questions, I have a couple of them. It's a little confusing to me. That this issue is mentioned in both the revenue and expense budgets and the SES budget. And it's kind of hard to discern how much Shutesbury actually will make out of the deal. It looks like from the Mass Department of Elementary and Secondary School Education for spreadsheet for fiscal year 23. The school choice receiving for 19.4 full-time equivalent students was 107,000 and some change for 109,000. So in sending was 95,051. That's in the budget. As well. And so that if you subtract it, we get like a little over $12,000 profit. That's what it looks like to me. I'm not sure if it's worth it, but anyway, so then in our budget, the numbers are pretty close. The 95,051 is the same. And the receiving number is 103,500, basically. I don't know if somebody dropped out or what the issue was. And our profit's only like 8,500 there. So I wonder about that. Is that how it works? You subtract the one from the other, and that's what we make in funds? Because on the SES budget, they're saying that like $161,000 worth of positions are being funded by school choice funds. So this obviously that's not the same thing. But I don't understand what the difference is. I know it's a big question.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure how much I can answer, but I mean, I guess there are just a couple points, and maybe Susie, if you have any thoughts you want to. Susie is kind of our representative on as kind of our liaison to the school committee. But so those school choice funds, you're right to say that there's a portion that comes to the town for students that are choicing into our community, and then there's an amount that we essentially send to for students that are choicing out of our school into to another district. So, and I think you know, the school's budget does indicate, and I'm not actually don't have it right in front of me, but take your word that the
Right.
number that you shared there, they have a plan for how to utilize a certain portion of the school choice funds that they've kind of accumulated over time on some positions that are important. And I think it's fair to say that those positions, many of them kind of address some of the needs that have presented themselves post pandemic. And so that is the purview of the school committee to make essentially those funds and the decisions about how to utilize those funds and what to spend them on are really the purview of the school committee to make. What we asked them to do is to kind of have a thoughtful plan, and they've shared that with us, and they communicated that to us, and they they describe how those funds are being used in their budget, but they don't actually contribute. They're not reflected in the elementary school expense lines that are in our budget. They kind of they work outside of the general operating budget. So I think that's all I can really share. But Susie, did you have anything else you wanted to
Yeah, I want to
say in
mention that
response?
the school has ownership of those funds and they've
Right.
accumulated some over time. So it's not dollar for dollar in and out in any one given year. They do have a very clear policy, which is available to look at. I will make sure that the school budget gets posted on the town website along with the other documents so that you can read their expenses, including positions funded by the school choice money. And how the state accounts for it, some people have had a dispute with, but changing the state's formulas is pretty difficult. I also want to say that the school choice program has clear guidelines about who can be enrolled. It includes children of staff can be enrolled in school choice if they fit some of the other criteria. That's a useful benefit to our staff so that they can have their kids come to school. So school choice has a lot of different purposes. And at this point, I don't have the current enrollment numbers in front of me, but I feel like the policy, as AJ said, they've explained their policy very clearly to us, and we're glad they found a way to use the funds effectively.
Okay, but are you saying that they're like saving up the funds year over year, like approximately $10,000 that we're getting, or is it coming from someplace else? Because the year before they had almost $154,000 they were spending on these positions. So I don't know. They must have a huge pot of money somewhere then.
No,
I'm
they
not
don't.
sure what this policy is. Maybe that would clear it up for me if it's posted on the website.
Okay, maybe Becky should answer.
Go ahead, Becky.
Amanda, there's two separate transactions.
Okay.
When a child from Shutesbury goes to, say, to Amherst or Pelham for school, that's what you see. You see an assessment to Shutesbury for that cost. So what you were looking at in our budget, when you see the outgoing number for choice, that's how much we're paying out.
Right.
That gets paid out of the cherry sheet.
Mhm.
The incoming money for our students goes straight to the school district in every community. So the full amount coming in, it's not 12,000, it's not a net amount. They're two separate amounts that are handled separately.
Okay.
Make sense?
Yeah,
So,
that makes more sense then.
Okay.
I mean, as far as the money being, yeah, building up, yeah, that makes more sense
Yeah.
to me. Okay, cool. So
All right.
I have one, can I ask one more question? or
Yeah,
am I-
yeah, go ahead.
am I done? On line 38 for fiscal year 25, the school choice sending tuition amount is lower. It's like $79,000. Does that mean that we already know that there will be fewer students attending another school, or is there some other reason?
I guess you're still on, Becky.
Becky?
those numbers are determined by DESE, and they're the ones tracking the choice students, and they give those numbers in the cherry sheet to us, and then they'll give updates in our payment amounts throughout the year. So
Okay,
the numbers do change over time, and they monitor it through the year. So we might start the year thinking we have, say, 5 choice students going out, and then by October, we might only have 2 choice students going out, and they make a correction at that point.
okay, so this is basically an estimate, and then there will be an actual later. Okay,
Yes, when they
All
close out the recap, we'll have all the actual numbers at the end of the tax year.
okay. I think that'll do me. All right, thank you.
Thanks, Amanda.
Thanks, Amanda.
Other questions? AJ, one of the interesting parts of your budget report each year that I find interesting, at least, is the very last section on the risks and opportunities. Do you want to, since we don't have other questions right now, do you want to go back and go over those?
Sure. All right. Let me just share that document again. Okay. Well, let me see. Maybe I'll talk about a couple of these and then open it up to other FinCom members. So, we've talked a little bit about school expenses. So I think this is clearly a concern of ours. I think it's fair to say that there's kind of right now a structural problem in kind of deficit that's sort of built into the operation of our regional school district right now, which is where the expenses are increasing by 3, 4, 5%, sometimes more each year, and their increases in revenue are kind of closer to 2.5%. So there's kind of a fundamental problem with the regional school budget right now that we really need to do something about, and we really need to kind of either fundamentally make some difficult decisions about on the expense side, or find additional revenues. And so the school committee is kind of committed to spending a significant amount of time in this upcoming year kind of figuring that out. So that's a big risk, a big concern of ours. I mean, there's a pretty extensive capital plan for the regional school buildings that is also, particularly in some of the out years, are going to require pretty significant investments from all 4 towns. That's a big concern. I've already spoken about the fact that the Chapter 70 kind of funding formula is really hurting our community and the region, because it's not keeping pace with the increases in expenses that our schools are experiencing. That's clearly a problem. I mean, there's there's infrastructure issues. I think, you know, Steve from the Highway Department, Steve Sullivan, will speak on Saturday about this kind of initial phase, if you will, of improving the dirt roads in our town that the Highway Department would like to oversee this year. But, you know, that's really going to be an ongoing problem. Our dirt roads have not been kind of regraded in quite a long time. There's been kind of maintenance, like minimal amount of maintenance done each year, but there's really kind of more significant amount of work that needs to be done to improve the quality of the dirt roads in our town. We've got, you know, we've always got sort of continued maintenance issues with our now 40-plus-year-old school building. Becky, do you want to say anything about PFAS testing and mitigation? This is kind of a new challenge that we've been dealing with for the last year, 2 years now, or a year now, and it's going to be an ongoing issue.
You're going into 3 years.
Yeah, 3 years, okay.
We've been held responsible since November of 2022. And in that time, we've installed about 35 poets in some town buildings, and the rest are residential homes in a 500-foot area that's determined, you know, then you have to go another 500 feet from each active case. So as some of the homes, we just had 2 more homes move into the active needing a PFAS poet today. So this is a changing dynamic situation. And the costs are driven by the requirements to mitigate, which means install filters if people have PFAS in their test results. The growing and constant expenditure, but that won't go away, is the amount of testing that we have to do, because we have to continue testing homes that are non-detects on a regular basis, as well as the homes that have filters in them. The testing, we hope to get to a point after a couple of years to slow down the testing. That will be a great savings to the town, as the tests average about $300 a piece. And on the dual tanks, which we have about 12 of, we have to do 3 tests. So it's $900 to do a test. We have already expended all of the $136,000 from the January 2023 town meeting. We are down to about 40,000 in the 150 that was released by the loan that happened last year through the Clean Water Trust. We have submitted a second request for another 150. We are submitting, the starting point is the warrant on the annual town meeting. So we're asking to go for another loan of 150,000 to make it through this upcoming year, hopefully a little more, year and a half of maintaining and protecting all the homes that need to be mitigated. So it's a very costly endeavor, and the loans will be helpful if we can get, we were promised that there would be forgiveness of part of the loan, and that the loan is no interest. So we don't know the exact amount of the forgiveness portion. We know the most minimal amount is 10%, but we still do not have a final report from the trust on what our final amount will be. Okay.
Thanks. I mean, I'll just say one thing about item 10 here. So, this is one of the challenges of budgeting for our town, which is we don't have many sources of commercial properties that are subject to commercial taxes. So 94% of all of the taxes that are levied in our town are levied to homeowners. And so you can see the comparison there. The average Massachusetts town has 83% of its tax levy come from residential taxes and 17% from commercial taxes. So that's a big challenge for us. In terms of opportunities, the first two listed there speak to kind of public land in Shutesbury that's not subject to tax levy, but we receive payment in lieu of taxes or pilot, and so clearly something that would benefit our town is if the kind of calculations of how much is contributed to our town in lieu of taxes, if those amounts increase. And we've been working with, members have been talking with Aaron Saunders, our state rep, about this issue. And so there's some hope that those amounts will increase, should certainly help us in future years. And then, last thing I would say on item 4 is, are there opportunities to collaborate with our neighboring towns to share resources and share expenses? That's complicated. There's not necessarily obvious opportunities, but that is something that we should continue to think about and pursue if and when they make sense.
Thanks, AJ.
Yeah.
Any more questions?
Eric,
Yes, Eric.
you're on mute.
Unmute,
You're on mute,
please.
Eric.
Just a quick comment that I'd thank the Finance Committee for their incredible hard work. I know this is a very hard budget year, and I certainly appreciate, on behalf of the town, I appreciate the amount of work that's been done. So that's just a comment. The question I would have is, again, a comment, I guess, is just the PFAS thing, just to go back to that for a second. That to me is really a huge ongoing potential problem. I mean, it's the number of houses that are they're requiring poets or treatment systems, that's what poets are, is increasing. The plan is right now to just treat the water supply and hopefully get things more, not that things go away, but just that's the plan. And that's a plan that over time, as Becky suggested, is an incredibly expensive plan. And I don't see anything that's going to change that in the future. I think that's it'll only increase, would be my guess. It may start, and I wouldn't be too, let's say, doom predicting, but I mean, it could even boil down to like municipal water systems that'll solve this problem, at least in that part of town where the PFAS is a problem. Anyway, I just mentioned that I think it's a problem, a huge problem. That it's number 7 on that list. It should be number 1 with a star and a bullet. As far as I'm concerned, it's big.
Thanks, Eric. Anything else? Anybody else? Michael? Oh,
Yes.
sorry.
That's good. It's actually a question, I think, for you, Paul, for you and for Becky. Becky had suggested that I just be present in case people had questions about the energy storage, which clearly is not a finance related thing. So I don't know, I don't have to do that if it's out of place in the setting, but I just wanted to make myself available if that was appropriate.
Great. Yeah, I I just wanted to see if there's anything else on the budget itself, and if not, then I thought we might move into the other articles on the warrant. So I'll give people one last chance. If you have any budget questions, now's the time. Okay, I don't see any, so thank you, AJ,
Paul?
and the Finance Committee. Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Sure, I just wanted to, neglected to say this earlier, I wanted to publicly thank my colleague George Arvanitis for putting that annual report that I walked you through together. That's something he has done for us for the last few years. And so really appreciate the hard work in putting that together, compiling all that information.
Thank you, George. And thank you to all the Finance Committee members. Being a former member of the Finance Committee, I know just how much time and effort it takes to all year long, really, to finally put together this budget for town meeting. So I certainly appreciate your efforts. And I guess, AJ, you can probably adjourn your meeting officially now if you
Yes.
want, and then we can move on to other warrant articles if people are interested in doing that.
All right, thanks, Paul. So I'm gonna adjourn the Finance Committee at 7:40 p.m.
Great. Okay, so as Michael indicated, he is here to talk about maybe more than just that one article. Becky is here, and other Finance Committee people are still here. So if people would like to go through the warrant more generally, this would be a good time to do that. In the past, I've just kind of walked through and kind of explain what each article is. Looking at the people that are present here, we have a lot of people who have been around for a while, so I don't know that it's worth the time and effort to do that. So why don't we start off at least with any specific questions that people might have about individual warrant articles? Does anybody have any? Becky?
Oh, sorry. Is that me making that sound? Yes.
Might have been me rustling papers, sorry.
No, I really appreciate Michael being here. The zoning articles, he is very familiar with, and they are a little bit more complicated. And the energy storage article, I'd really appreciate getting his review of, or short review of, if possible.
Okay, so why don't we jump right into those? I think it would be very helpful, since those are often some of the more complicated articles that we deal with at town meeting. So Michael, I'll give the floor to you. You can just kind of approach, these several articles that you're involved with in any way that you'd like.
Great. Thank you, Paul. I appreciate it. Thanks, Becky. So I think I'll start with the energy storage one. And I think the thing most important about this one is that it's a general bylaw, so it's not a zoning bylaw. And the idea there is that it affects all town, regardless of where in town it is. The idea with energy storage, it's more commonly known as battery storage, but there's other ways of storing energy. There's a big push at the state level and also nationally to create energy storage. So as we're moving to create more electric generation, whether it's solar or wind, hydro, et cetera, that we're creating places to store energy. What I think this is about is to make sure that as we go forward with doing that they remain to be the right scale and done safely for the public health and safety of folks in town and just for the environment generally. So the big thing, that's sort of the purpose behind it. I think the big thing is that what this does is it creates a new system process in town. So because it's not a zoning bylaw, Normally if there's a special permit, like we can talk about with other things, there, you either go to the planning board or the ZBA, depending on the project. What this would do would create energy storage licensing board, which would be composed of all 3 members of the select board, a representative of the Board of Health, Planning Board, ZBA, and the Concom, so 7 people. And they would act as the licensing body. So that if there was a battery proposed in town, that essentially that energy storage system would have to get a license from the licensing board before it could proceed. And this basically outlines what's required in terms of the application, what the timelines are, what the criteria to be considered for, and it's for both the construction and then the operation is what the license would be. So because it is a general bylaw, it only needs a majority vote, as opposed to the usual 2/3, and it would be effective, as of if it gets approved on the 27th. So it goes through, just like I mentioned, there's some requirements in terms of applications. There's regulatory compliance, so it has to basically comply with all the existing state and local laws, including Endangered Species and Wetlands Protection, Environmental Policy Act, Board of Health guidelines, et cetera, for Shutesbury. There's some emergency response requirements. The biggest thing, there's a section in this that pertains to lithium-ion batteries in particular. So like I said, there's different ways to store energy. You can sort of do it in a variety of ways, but really the only practical commercially available way of doing battery storage in America these days is with lithium-ion batteries. So if anyone reads the papers, there's Tesla cars that catch on fire, there's bikes that catch on fire, et cetera. And the problem with these big ones is a thing called thermal runaway, where you get a battery that heats up and it catches on fire, and because it catches on fire, it heats up the next battery. I was going to look up and I forgot, so I apologize, but there in Wendell, there's a battery project that they're being confronted with, which is, I want to say it's like 15 or 20 acres in size. So if you imagine sort of tractor trailer boxes that these things filled, so they can be rather large. With ours, what we're saying is that based on the federal regulations, a small energy storage facility is under 1 megawatt. And so you would not need a license if you're under 1 megawatt because it'd be small. You would not need a license if it's residential. So, as people are doing solar in their house, the normal or prudent thing these days is to get a battery system as well, so that when it's cloudy, you're saving up the energy, then you can use it else, and when Shutesbury loses power, you can tap into that as well. And then for installations that are above 10 megawatts, that they would be prohibited, but anything between 1 and 10 would be the licensing. So I think that's primarily it without getting too much into the nitty-gritty details. But if people have questions, I can definitely dive into the details of that. So I don't see any questions, which is terrific. So
You want
So
to
I
keep
can-
going on some of the other
yeah,
planning
yeah,
board
I think-
related articles?
Yeah, I'll definitely do that. So there's 2 warrant articles from the planning board, which are zoning related, and these both require 2/3 vote. The first one is a lighting bylaw. And for those of you who are regulars, which it looks like everyone probably is, not last year, but the year before that, town meeting requested that the planning board come forth with the lighting bylaw. And last year we didn't do that. So this year, we're 1 year behind the times, but we're proposed it. And it's really an attempt by the planning board to balance regulating lighting so that we're preserving dark sky, non-glare, non-light trespass, as well as also being cognizant of the fact that people need light and there's existing lighting situations in town. So there's an international movement called the Dark Sky Network. And we basically looked at that as a starting point. And I think the things it's in the bylaw, but the things that are worth calling out. So the 5 underlying principles are: be useful, so that all lights should have a clear purpose. Be targeted, so that light should be directed only where needed. Provide low light levels, so light should be no brighter than necessary. Be controlled, so lighting should only be used when it's useful. And then have a warmer color, because it's a spectrum of light. So warmer color or amber lights when possible. So that sort of was the foundation from which we built this. And we went through and tried to minimize it. So it's pretty sparse relative to other things that have come out of the planning board recently, which are, you know, tens and tens of pages. The thing that I would say, which is really, there's two important parts. One is that the effective date would be April 27th. So if whatever lighting you have as a homeowner or in town that's not compliant, unless you do a major renovation of some sort, you wouldn't have to comply. So it's not going to be backwards, you know, applicable. And then the other thing, which hopefully the select board will appreciate, but given my time on the select board, we were struggling with enforcement. You know, so if you come out with lighting is one of those things where clearly people can have opinions about their neighbors and things. And it struck me that it has the potential to be very much like dog hearings, which I know are the least favorite thing that anyone on the select board has to deal with. But the starting point was that we put into the bylaw that really what the town encourages is residents to come to a resolution amongst themselves. So really encouraging neighbors to talk to neighbors and figure out if there's a reasonable way to go. And then if not, someone can bring a complaint to the select board, and the select board can listen to it and figure out what the next logical step is. There are some towns, like I know in Nantucket, they actually have a lighting officer. That seemed a little extreme for Shutesbury. The planning board discussed the building inspector doing it, and there's no way the building inspector is going to schlep to Shutesbury in the middle of the night to look at lights. So we're trying to come up with something that's practical if we're actually going to have a bylaw. So that's pretty much it. That, you know, currently there's only a few things that are prohibited in our bylaws. So we currently prohibit neon lights and metal halide, mercury vapor, and quartz lamps. So we're really sort of taking what's a very minimal designation. The idea is basically to, you know, we all live in Shutesbury because it's a rural place and we like it, and sort of figure out how to preserve that sense while also balancing the needs of people who are living here. So that's that one. And again, as I said, town meeting 2 years ago asked us to bring this forward. So we are complying with that request. So any questions on that one?
I just want to
Okay.
make sure people understand that we're talking about Articles 26, 27, and maybe 28 here, just in case people want to look those up.
Okay, yeah, I didn't memorize which is which. So the next one I would say is described as a smorgasbord. It's consolidated of 4 items in one warrant article. Some are very straightforward. And the 4 things that this one does, it creates a new table use in the use table in the zoning bylaws. So the zoning bylaws have different uses. There's residential, there's business, etc. We created a new one, which is industrial, because we're discovering that, you know, there's now energy uses that are distinctly separate. So we're not changing any of the parameters regarding those uses. We're just creating a new bucket that's called industrial. So that would put in soil mining, light industry, wireless communications, and temporary wind monitoring systems. So that's just sort of a neatening of things so we can categorize. The next one harkens back to another town meeting vote that happened a few years ago, where the planning board brought forth and the town meeting approved changes in the associate member language regarding planning board members. So the associate members, of which there are 2. The Attorney General approved most of it, but rejected one key aspect of it. And after the Attorney General rejected it, we conferred with Donna McNichol, and she thought that our interpretation was correct. And basically the idea is we wanted in town meeting voted for in the instance where you need an associate member because an elected planning board member is not able to act, that a associate member could step in and do all the things that the elected planning board member could do. That was the idea. The AG said that that wasn't the case and they could only act on special permits. So Donna's recommendation was if we wanted to actually meet the intent of town meeting, we'd had to go the legislative process. So a home rule petition, and if you recall last year, town meeting voted on a home rule petition about associate members. Once that was approved, we sent it to the House and they approved it. They sent it to the Senate. It got signed by the governor a few months ago. And so what this does now that it's law, because the governor signed it, is it basically restates what we were intending to do a few years ago by saying that the law that is passed is now what we're going to do in Shutesbury for associate members for planning board, and it spells that out. So it's just one big loop to come back to where we were a few years ago. It was, I commend everyone who was part of it. It was a little bit laborious, but we got there. So that's that. The next one is a little longer, and this is for special permits that get approved by either the planning board or the ZBA. There's criteria that when you're looking at these that you have, both boards have to look at and consider when approving something or disapproving it. So there's general findings, there's specific findings. And I think where the planning board came down is that the last time these were really looked at was probably 2008 when the zoning bylaws were fully updated. And we went through and added things that we've sort of come to the fore in the last bunch of years. So adding different criteria in terms of awareness of public health, welfare, and safety, forest lands, wetlands, drinking wells, things like that. So we basically expanded on that. And then the last one, this was informed by a special permit the planning board and the ZBA dealt with in the last year, where there's a concept of de minimis changes. So basically things that are very minimal and don't really substantially change something. And currently the way the zoning bylaw works is that if you have a special permit application and then you change something slightly, you have to redo the entire process. And so in the instance where this was informed from, the planning board approved a special permit, but we said that this path had to be, I think it was 10 feet wide, and it had to get approval by the ZBA. The ZBA said, no, it can't be 10 feet, it has to be 9 feet. So it was literally a foot difference between our definition and the ZBA's definition. And the applicant had to go through the whole process again. So what conversation we had was, if the planning board or the ZBA votes to determine that something is de minimis, so really insignificant changes, the three things that can get avoided is they don't have to repeat the filing fee, they don't have to pay again, they don't have to have another public hearing, and they don't have to resubmit the same unchanged documents that they've already submitted. So it sort of is common sense and sort of just a helpful thing, you know, if someone gets caught up in that minimal stuff, but it's only if it's very insignificant changes and the board would have to vote that. So those are the four things in this. Hopefully I haven't totally bored you. John.
Who makes the determination if it's de minimis?
The board. So either you guys or us.
Me.
Okay.
Thank you.
You got the power.
Okay,
I'm
is
off the
that,
hook.
did you want to say more about that one, Michael, or were you done with that?
No, I'm set. And do you want me to just mention the one that we're not doing or leave that be?
Sure.
Okay. So wearing my other hat as chair of ECAC, Energy and Climate Action, you might have seen Article 9 was to approve an opt-in stretch code. And last night and then this morning, we confirmed with Donna that unfortunately we missed a step. So the opt-in stretch code, we're already, because Shutesbury is a green community, we're already committed to, as of January 2023, the updated stretch code. And what we were proposing is an opt-in stretch code, which is just a little bit extra in terms of us moving towards climate action. It would require either new homes or significantly renovated homes, more than 1,000 square feet, to wire their houses for solar. We're still supportive of it, but what we realized in reviewing the guidance is there was never a public hearing that took place. ECAC made the recommendation to the select board. There's a little confusion between the select board and ECAC about who might have called that public hearing, so it never happened. So clearly, if we didn't do the public hearing, so that's getting pulled back. And we will plan on bringing it to the next town meeting that we can. So, and we'll probably just talk to this as Paul is allowing us during reports, just to sort of do an educational moment. And I think I'm done.
Thank you.
Great. Becky, did you want to add something, or
No, I was just saying.
thanking them? Okay, yes, thank you. Okay, any questions on any of that? Anything that Michael just covered? Okay, people are still hanging in here, so I don't know if that means that you're interested in going through some of the rest of the warrant or not, but I'll just keep going. It's a little bit before 8. I figured, certainly by 8:30 we should be wrapping up here, if not sooner. So maybe since we've actually covered a fair amount of the warrant already, maybe I will just quickly go through the rest of it. And if people have questions on any of the items that any of the articles, then just kind of raise your hand and we'll stop and discuss it. Only problem here is that if I bring up the warrant, then I can't see the hands raised so much. But I'll do my best. Okay, so we get a lot of routine articles in the warrant, so we'll kind of breeze over those really fast. Article 1 is one of those where we just hear reports from town committees, officers, and boards. Article 2, AJ already mentioned that earlier. That's the regional school budget formula that we vote on every year, and this year there may be some twists with that, so we'll see what we know as of town meeting on that. But that's what that one is about. Article 3 is the budget, which we've already gone over. And then we get into a number of articles, not a number, but several articles that are very routine that we do every year. And in recent years, we've combined them into something called a consent agenda, where we can vote on like multiple articles all at once. So articles 5, 6, 7, oh, I'm sorry, 4, 5, 6, and 7, I think we'll try to combine into one vote this year. Those are all routine, giving permission, authorizing the treasurer to, do certain agreements and the select board to apply for grants and so forth. Those are things we do every year. Article 8 is very similar to that. And again, if you have questions on any of this, just raise your hand and hopefully I'll see you. Article 8 is similar to 7, except it's something new. We haven't dealt with this specifically before for the cemetery groundskeeper. So I decided to keep that one out of the consent agenda just in case people have specific questions, since it is a new article, a new agreement. Okay, so far so good. Article 9, Michael just mentioned that. That's the new specialized energy code, which we will not be actually voting on this year, but we'll hear more about that at least during the Article 1 reports at town meeting. Article 10 is something a little different than we usually deal with. It's related to the Shutesbury Athletic Club, allowing them, I guess that's kind of expanding the parameters of their operating permit. Is that right, Becky? To allow them to open a little bit earlier or sell liquor a little bit earlier on weekends.
Sundays. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. And again, I'm pausing because I'm just kind of moving my copy of the warrant aside to see if anyone has any questions or comments. Article 11 is amending the revolving fund bylaw, which we deal with in Article 12, to add a new one related to the Cemetery Commission. So that's creating a new revolving fund with a spending limit of $2,000. And as of next year, well, even this year, I guess that, assuming that passes, that's already built into Article 12. Right, Becky?
Yes.
Yeah. So you do see, if you have the warrant in front of you, the list of revolving funds that we have includes the cemetery revolving fund, which we'll be voting on in Article 11. And Article 13 is more PFAS requests, money requests. And we've already heard about that tonight as well. And we've dealt with that at several of our last couple of town meetings. And then we get into our capital items, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, and 19. These were all listed in the budget report that AJ reviewed earlier. But we'll be dealing with those individually at town meeting. The next couple articles, 20 and 21, are related to the Community Preservation Act. These are routine articles that we deal with every year as well, just in terms of how the money that we tax ourselves for, where it goes in the different funds that are set up within the Community Preservation Act. And then 21 is just administrative money that we approve for the CPC, Community Preservation Committee. 22 is the MLP, Municipal Light and Power Group, I guess, and their operating budget for the year. This is our broadband. This is another routine article, even though the figures change a little bit each year. We deal with their budget in one article every year. 23 and 24 both deal with paying bills from prior years. They require higher majorities than our usual votes for whatever reason. I don't know. Let's see. Questions, comments? I see none. 24, oh, I'm sorry, I did that one already. 25 is from our police department, a request for a general bylaw related to solicitation in town. So that's something new. And then Michael just went over 26, 27, and 28. Those are the planning board articles. And I've got to zoom ahead now to the last couple articles that we have on the warrant this year are both citizen petitions. 29, oh, I'm still not there. 29 is from a group regarding responsible solar. And you can read that in the warrant. And Article 30 is related to non-citizen permanent residents given the ability to vote. And that is it. Boy, piece of cake. We should be out of there by noontime on Saturday. So comments, questions about anything that we've dealt with tonight? I don't see any. Final comments. Oh, John?
The PFAS, I know that it's sort of marching up Pelham Hill Road. I'm wondering if, is there a map that shows, you know, what houses have been tested and what houses are yet to be tested?
All the houses within the area, within the group have been tested, and more than once. So we did creep up Pelham Hill Road but then have had a hard stop. And one other good piece of news regarding PFAS, the only one I've had this year, is that the library tested negative for PFAS. Their new well tested negative. So maybe when it moves from one location, it's, you know, maybe it leaves. But some could stay, but the hope is it keeps marching away, whichever direction is close. It seems down gradient is what it seems to travel. It's been traveling down gradient, so.
Thank you.
Anything else? Are there any final comments from AJ, Finance Committee, Becky, Select Board members? No?
Nope.
Yes,
Just want to thank
Becky.
everybody for participating.
I just want to remind people it's at the school. Last 4 years have been behind town hall, but we are at the school. We are indoors. The kitchen will be functioning full speed. There will be food, and look forward to a good day.
Great. John, did you want to say something or just acknowledging? Okay. Great. Well, thank you all for attending tonight, and I look forward to seeing you all on Saturday. Thank you, AJ and Becky and everybody else.
Thanks, Paul.
Thanks for moderating, Paul.
You're welcome.
Much, Paul.
Okay, go Bruins. Good night.
Go Celtics.